Rolling here into turn 5, May, June 1862. Beginning of the summer of 62 here. What do we have to say? Some new leaders. Haven't put these guys out. Hancock, pretty decent. Logan, and Hooker. As well as promotions, lost ones from before, etc. The Confederate leader pool is beginning to get smaller and smaller as we go. More and more of an effect on who sort of controls the war. And likewise, the reinforcements 552 versus 772. The command decisions, in this case, everybody went all out west and east. The feeling was that the Trans-Mississippi was over. But maybe not so much anymore. I have to make my allocations for the next turn. I think the West is still the primary place. On the other hand, of course, I've got Lee up there, which sometimes you can kind of sleaze things with Lee and put him in the secondary role, theater-wise. The theater boundary generally doesn't come into play too much. Along the Trans-Mississippi, of course, it's right along the Mississippi, just running across there. And that actually, you do have crossover. But here, between the West and the East, runs up here, and you almost never see any spillover there, unless it's, railing troops over. Anyway, well, late in the war, it starts to happen, because the Union has to, they have to garrison this, but then they have to push in towards the east often. What are we going to do here? I don't know what the picks are going to be for next turn. I really don't. Basically nothing's moved over here, and it's not liable to take off. I think the big advantages are still in the West. The question, of course, is, now if nothing's moving here, is the Trans-Mississippi more important? I don't know. All right. Well, things have gotten exciting. The Union Army tried to cross over here. Johnston intercepted, defeated McClellan, drove him back. Now, I still don't want to use CPs in the east to try to burn away Confederate troops. That's the last thing I want to do. So, after McClellan recovered from his demoralization, Johnston starts entrenching, and he sends out more troops out here, which he can also start entrenching with, and build a river, an entrenchment line along the Potomac River. That's going to make life real hard for the Union, because all I have to do is put Johnston in the center hex, have fortifications in these three spaces, and at that point it becomes really, really difficult for the Union to cross the river. They still have the concept of naval operations, though, and they could do something like the Peninsular Campaign, since we found out that that's legit. Van Dorn, after charging through Rolla, he marches up into St. Louis. Now, the Union had managed to build a fort in St. Louis. That did not avail them much. A fortress would have done much better. But they were forced to retreat because it was only a fort. They're back across the Mississippi. There's very little. It's quite possible Missouri may be captured. It can't be converted back to Confederate. It's too late for that. But it can be converted, and the victory points swing over into the Confederate chain. It will never be a supply source for, a supply source or a military source of recruitment for the Confederates. Problem there is Van Dorn lost two of his good leaders. He had a couple of one-pointers there. Taylor is dead. He's over in the dead pile here. And Hardee got wounded. Got a lot of wounds and promotions coming from that Army of the Potomac attack. This is one of the things the Union really needs to make the dumb attacks early on in order to get their leaders promoted. But sometimes it's very tough. Sometimes you just have other things you want to do. You don't want to get your army hosed. In this case, I wasn't getting it hosed, but now the situation strategically is looking very ugly there. And things keep getting worse for the Union, which is sort of making the Confederates grow a little too cocky, maybe. Spreading out over here, this was beginning to look dangerous, but the Union's unwilling to try to break it here, because doing so would leave Washington way too open. They just can't do that. And if they attack across the Potomac here, although they may never be able to soon. Johnston's got a good chance of interdicting, as he did on the initial attack. You kind of want to get the attacks to get leaders promoted for later, but maybe not if the cost is too high. And in this case, all the leaders who are going to get promoted have their markers in the bag. So Banks decides to launch an attack, and he tries to get into this hex. See, he was back here, 1, 2, 3, 4. He couldn't quite make it to Nashville. So he takes this little shortcut, gets intercepted by Lee, which was almost impossible not to have happen. But he doesn't know for sure Lee's there. Of course, yeah, I'm firing Albert Sidney Johnston. Who's going in there? You know? And of course, on top of that, in my particular set, good old Robert E. Lee, his counter's pretty obvious. Anyway, the Union Army under Banks ends up, honestly, with the shifts against it, it was a little under strength, I believe. The Confederate Army of Tennessee was bigger, so it was already at the -3 table when it made its attack. Now remember, the players don't know what these values are, and the Union didn't have cav, so they couldn't have even scouted. They don't have, I don't think, a cav leader on the board yet. They have Stoneman available, but he's somewhere in this big pile of leaders. So they have no intelligence. Yeah. Crossing a navigable river, the Cumberland's navigable, drop that 2 more. You know, I was thinking, well, I'll probably be in the lead, I'll drop down to around the 0, it'll be okay. Well, there were a lot of troops there, and demoralized, pushed back, and then Lee was not demoralized, so he was able to pursue. Now, on the bad side for the Confederates, they lost A.P. Hill, who is a pretty decent leader, although he gets worse, I think, as he gets larger commands. But they got some chits in there for a number of their leaders, and the Union also got to get Lyons and Grant into the batch. And they've got Sherman, I think he didn't get wounded either. I know somebody, Sedgwick, got wounded there. Sherman's increases in there too. So these promotions are a big deal. They're going to change the war, and the quicker the Union can get them into play, the better. They probably should have been attacking earlier to try to get these channeled up, but sometimes it's tough to convince yourself, and it has been in this game so far. I think the Union's in a lot of trouble here, but the Confederates keep pursuing them in various places. We got a new force building up here. Under Burnside again. Which could provide a lot of trouble, even, you know, for Van Dorn. Because even if he's got a bigger force, he is so bad. Burnside is no bright bulb either, though. I did want to take time, somebody pointed out on BGG, when I captured Rolla and maybe Springfield, I don't remember quite how these fell. Yeah, Springfield changed hands a couple of times with fights right in it. The depot should have been destroyed. Now that, playing with the rules the way they're written, makes fighting in the Trans-Mississippi even harder than I'm used to. Now, maybe I'm used to this, I don't know. But given that I've already given the Confederates a couple of advantages here doing this, I'm going to leave it open and play by the same rules if the Union manages to arrange a counterattack. I'll try to remember that. But see, the thing is, the Confederates really don't need more depots. Well, yeah, they do, because they don't have a rail link. They can rail link to here and then depot. I don't think so. So they're not going to be able to make a big incursion, though. If I get some gunboats along the Mississippi in the north, they're not going to be able to cross over anyhow. The best they can do is probably convert Missouri. We had one a little while ago on the 6 table. We got another one now with a roll of a 10. We're getting deeper and deeper into this turn. Lots of CPs being generated, but they may not get used. A couple more activations, and Grant is, Lee is still pushing hard. He managed another attack. This time he got demoralized, but he managed to get a rally in there because the die roll difference was only a 2. Went to the Union, but the Union can't use that. They brought their naval forces in to try to protect against things, but they're just not getting the point spread they need to be able to use the command points they have, which is the real problem of crappy leaders. You need some good leaders on the board to be able to do things with the lower valued roles. Well, the big swing came, 7 points, but it was a Confederate advantaged one. Lee was able to rally if he needed to. I don't remember if he did, swing around and actually destroy the Army of the Tennessee. It's very hard in this different Army of the Tennessee, different Tennessee. It's very hard in this game to destroy an army, as in the Civil War it historically was. The problem is that army had been so brutalized over so many attacks, and the Union wasn't funneling additional troops into it. They could have saved it probably. Maybe they were hoping to rally it and get some troops into it or whatever. But as it is, it was destroyed. On top of that, and this isn't affected chance-wise by it being destroyed, but Grant was killed, except for just numerous battles. So he is out of this war. Lyons is still around, and he might come back. Well, he will come back, and he has a promotion there. Banks is still around, and it's bad enough I got Banks in the force pool. I also have this threat of Fremont and Halleck going back into the pool. I spent the points to rally their unit because it would disintegrate otherwise, and it's pretty hard. I mean, I could have shipped them off individually for 2 points instead of the 4 to rally the unit, but, you know, and Burnside has built up an army back here in Lexington. Unfortunately, Van Dorn's gotten a chance to rally during this, so the opportunity that was there for Burnside to go down and destroy Van Dorn's little army, well, now that's become an uglier possibility. But they've got a tenuous supply line. Burnside is running off this rail here. He could grab this and burn it and really cut them out of supply, and that would pretty much force Van Dorn to try to get out of there. I don't think he can hold Missouri. The only chance of doing the damage in Missouri is when you own it as a state, and it's just not going to work. But the Confederates are overall doing better than I think I've seen them do yet. This plug up here on the Potomac, they managed to fortify it further. Victories in Kentucky destroying the army. The Cumberland army is still here, and that's the big one. But it doesn't have the troops in it yet. And neither did the Tennessee. I probably had 2 armies operating too early. And I don't know, usually I'm more cautious with the Union than I think I have been here, and they're just getting hammered. There's basically no Union troops in the West right now. Lee's left a small force down at Bowling Green with the intention of maybe trying to capture some more of these victory point hexes with it. He's going to have to get a leader up there, though. At the worst, it's a decent defensive position. It'll slow down whatever the Union could probably scrape together this turn. And he's marching down to try to deal with the Army of Cumberland. Feels like he's got it pinned against the river. Now they can retreat across the river, but he can cause real problems if he drives it into the Trans-Mississippi. Likewise, Burnside's move has forced Van Dorn to slide into place, protecting his supply line. He's given up St. Louis. He still holds it, but it's really a matter of if he can't defeat Burnside, he's not going to be able to hold his position. He doesn't want to just fall back due to lack of supplies. Lee's countermarch was successful in catching, well, not Rosecrans anymore. McDowell ended up stumbling into camp and taking command. No real harm to the Union on that. Rosecrans is not really great at this either. Had McDowell shown up and not been in command, it would have been a problem. For example, if McClellan had been in command here, because he would give an additional +1 to the Confederates, and they're down to +4 at this point. But they were able, with their re-rolls, to be able to inflict a D3 result, force the Union to retreat back to the hex they came from, and, well, they only took a single casualty. So Lee is really kind of grinding the Union manpower down. Now, part of this problem is the Union manpower isn't all on the board. There's a lot of reinforcements that I haven't brought in, which is some of the difficulty. The Confederates have brought in most everything except in the east. where the Union also hasn't been beefing itself up too much. Lee manages to push McDowell across the Mississippi finally. And, well, there's a secondary force building up here under General Thomas, but that can't turn into an army. This is a real problem for the Union. Now, historically, you know, they probably would have been able to come up with another army had their armies been destroyed. However, the price for making the error that was made there in Kentucky is a high one, and I don't know. I'm just thinking the limit on Union armies really probably shouldn't be the counter mix. There should be more counters available in some kind of notional counters that they could bring in if they lost an army, because they probably could have rebuilt. But that blow maybe could be represented as other things, and in a sense, this is almost the kind of thing that would have caused a peace talk to begin. It should be a victory condition rather than the way it actually plays out. The Confederates, though, lost good old Baldy here, Ewell. He hadn't reached his promotion yet, but it was in the stack, so I posthumously promoted him. Nothing going on elsewhere. There aren't enough command points in the Trans-Mississippi for the Union to do anything. They can't rally McDowell Rosecrans's force, and can't get it out of here. It's in supply, but it's in kind of a dumb place. Thomas has made his way down and captured Bowling Green. It's about all I can do, really. And Lee has countermarched again and is now facing Thomas. He's not going to, unless something strange happens, he's not going to get a shot in on him. I just don't have enough CPs here. And actually, I got a problem. Even my far west CPs aren't terribly helpful. I got one more point to spend. I'll start sending a Kiowa out there. For the Union, they managed to burn down another Texas fort. Those aren't worth a lot. But, you know, it's kind of a, what else do I do with a single point? And that's one of the things the Far West allows you to do. It allows you to burn a point when you might not want to otherwise. And that's where it maybe breaks the game a little bit, and it also gives more opportunities for this thing to come into trigger, for another doubles to come in, for the game, for each turn to be a little longer. See, it definitely changes the flavor of it a little. Big die roll difference of 9, this time in favor of the Connecticut Confederates. It depleted all their points. They have nothing left for this turn. The Union, seeing that, well, they rallied Thomas. But they also tried McClellan around here, leaving very limited forces in Washington. Now, Washington is vulnerable here. Marched around, overran this hex, marched into here. If they hadn't been intercepted, great. They would have overrun the other entrenchment, and they'd be in a pretty good position. But Johnston intercepts them. They end up on the worst table. A re-roll against them, and actually should have been 2 re-rolls against them. And maximum die roll benefits for the Confederates, none for themselves. Horrible situation. Now, McClellan had enough points left, command points, to rally, which is one of the reasons I did that, but this is not good at all. I wanted to test that line, see if it was as bad as it looked. Well, it is. That pretty much might be the game right there, to tell you the truth. It's a matter of, hey, what do I use my points for, though? You know, I had these command points in the east built up and couldn't do anything because of the line, and I just cannot help but, well, take some World War I tactics there. And yeah, you got the expected result mainly. 1 loss for the Confederates, 3 for the Union. It's not the casualties that are the big deal ever in this game, though. It's your positioning, and this was not a good position. They would have been better off just slamming straight down, but they wanted to kill the trench line all the way across. And the Union also drained the rest of their points, mainly reinforcing Washington. Huge force back in place there. Washington is probably not at risk anymore. McClellan's got some 8 strength points back there, no commander, but that should be enough to hold it, and that's changing the situation. Over here, Thomas was able to take a reinforcement because Bowling Green, Kentucky, that's his home territory now. We ended up rolling the doubles, and that, of course, ends things here. The Union was left with a pile of naval commands they had really nothing they can do with. All right. Yeah, it's bad when you're in that kind of situation. I got some cleanup to do. There's some losses. The poor Army of the Cumberland is stuck back here, disintegrating. Eh, boy. Up it goes.